Healthy quorum of the committee. I'll just quickly read the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county metro region, is the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Oyate, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Oyate, the Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Oyate, the 11 federally recognized tribes of Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities, representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home. Committee members, we have an agenda in front of us. If there's no objections, I'll just consider it approved. It's approved. Thank you. Next is approval of the December 15, 2025 Community Development Committee meetings. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Thank you, Council Members Carter and Morales. Any discussion on that? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. We have one consent business item, South St. Paul Corridor Small Area Plan Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmembers Lindstrom and was that Wolf? Thank you, Councilmember Wolf. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Now we'll move on to our two non-consent. That's right?
One
non-consent, oh, the others are information. Thank you. Non-consent business item, it's item 2026-18. It's the City of Maplewood Century Ponds Comprehensive Plan Amendment, and that will be presented by Patrick Boylan. Welcome, Mr. Boylan.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. My name is Patrick Boylan. I work in local planning assistance. I'll be talking to you about this Century Ponds Amendment that is in the City of Maplewood. Kind of did a dashed line around this, and bear with me as I go through a couple of them. Maplewood's a interesting and rather unusually shaped city. It's sort of a backwards 7. And so this is in, Maplewood itself is one of just a handful of committees that are in more than one district. So this is in Mark Jenkins and Chilese, or the cities in Mark Jenkins and Councilmember Chilese district. This southern portion, Interstate 94, is run through the city, and this is actually in Mr. Jenkins' district. So again, a close-up showing the regional systems, going back to community designations, showing that it's urban status, and then the community regional systems, including Interstate 494 is what I did in yellow, but again, showing its location, that southern part of the city, is, again, a very unusual, very interestingly shaped city, a lot of history behind it that I'm not going to get into. But there are a number of regional systems nearby, including Battle Creek Regional Park, which is not in the city, but it's very close by. Anybody who's interested in winter activities, I highly recommend that. So the existing plan for the city shows it as a golf course south of Lower Afton Road, and the kind of small boxes in the middle of the image in front of you, that's existing. That's kind of part of a different development. So the red bold line is the area in question, and that's a golf course, or was a golf course. And the proposal is to change it to this low density development for a project that would develop a number of homes. It's almost 93 acres, and density is always an interest, and so I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about this with you. This is a table that staff at the council has developed from the 2040 plan, so a few years ago. And what we do is we take data from the 2040 comp plan, and all the acres are listed here that the city at that time expected. Now remember, they started their comp plan in 2015 and sent it to us in probably 2018 or early 2019. So over time, this becomes, as precise as it was at the beginning, it becomes less precise as time goes on. But we track minimum density for a lot of good reasons. One is for affordable housing reasons, others to ensure that for Thrive 2040, and now Imagine 2050, that the city is hitting their respective minimum densities. So the city of Maplewood under Thrive calls for an average of 10 units per acre. That's under Thrive. So again, the lower line or the bottom line on this shows overall density of 11.28 for minimum number of units to somewhere just over 27 units per acre, 27, units per acre. So that's under Imagine 2050. However, under Imagine 2050, the city is designated as urban edge, and urban edge communities are expected to be at least 14 units per acre. So while this amendment clearly shows the city is not meeting its Imagine 2050 density minimums, they are moving in the right direction. And there is a notification or an advisory comment in the staff report that reminds the city of their designation and their need to have a different or higher densities for this. Another thing to call out that in my staff report is something to say that recent development in the city is significant. And so I did some time pulling together some data from our research department and did some analysis. And this is just using building permit data that cities give to us every year. And so I got a long list of information from our research folks, and it includes all residential development. We collect all kinds of development, but specifically I called for residential development. And I took acres for the single family, I took acres for the multifamily, and determined that between 2019, which is when they adopted their plan, and 2024, last year we had the data, so 5 years roughly, the development city resulted in 55 single-family homes and 851 multifamily units. So again, it's a factor of 8 times or 16 times rather. 906 total housing units over 44.8 acres. And so if you take that number of units, 906 units over 44.8 acres, you come up with a combined density of 20.2 units per acre. So they're exceeding Imagine 2050. It's just we measure it a little bit differently. For the staff report, following staff protocol, this is it. They are under density. We think that the city and the development patterns of the city, particularly the market for high-density residential and or other types of housing products in the city, that they will meet, if not exceed, Imagine 2050 policy. Again, taking a minute, a little bit different in normal presentations to actually point this out. So the proposed amendment for you conforms to regional system plans, I find it consistent with regional policies, and is compatible with the plans of adjacent affected jurisdictions. And before you, your staff report details recommendation and action to authorize the city of Maplewood to place its comp plan into effect, and to find the amendment does not change the city's forecast, and advise the city to implement the advisory comments and the review record for sanitary sewage forecasts and land use being the one that I pointed out about the policy change and increase in density under Imagine 2050. I'm available for any questions at this time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Boylan, and thanks for taking extra minute to talk about your methodology here. That was very educational. Questions, comments? Councilmember Chambliss, then Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Chair and Mr. Boylan. And I do also appreciate the additional information. It makes me curious about a couple of things. One is how the other locations kind of look in terms of the city's culture, the city's goals, the city's demographics, and what the city's plans are in relationship to various factors like that, because I know historically we've had areas where you have neighborhoods where the poor people are in high density areas, and other folks are in lower density. I'm just wondering about patterns of development and how that might relate to some of our other Imagine 2050 goals. And then, let's see, what was my second question? Oh, that's about precedent. So when we have a city that has just crossed over to a different community designation, how do we, how much leeway do we give them in that transition? Do we look further in those cases as well to see where they might be meeting the density requirements? I have those kind of questions that come up.
Thank you. Mr. Bullen?
Chair and Councilmember, I think I'll take the second thing first, if I could. So designation 2, in this case, from moving from Thrive to Imagine 2050 for a higher density standard, all sewer all cities in community designations for residential increase. We went from 3 to 3.5 for the outer ring, and then the urban areas went from 20 to 25. So their urban edge, they went from 10 to 14. These levels, there's a lot of methodology and a lot of discussion that went into that, including a lot of outreach. Part of what went into it was looking at cities' plans and looking at current development. The determination was, sure, they can do 14 units per acre, even though there are 10 under Thrive, moving to 14. The snapshot I took is not complete. It's not foolproof methodology, but it's pretty solid, I think, in terms of, will the market actually develop something that more than at least 14 or more? I think the answer is yes. So going back to your first comment and questions about cultures and goals and demographics and patterns, I don't have a lot to report on that. I know that that's something interrelated with Imagine 2050 with council goals we're watching in terms of like any sort of indicators or things that our research department is looking at. And I'm looking at Chair Barras to kind of maybe make a clarification on that would be great.
You got a demotion, Director Barras. Director Barras.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it was a promotion, but I just wanted to share that we find ourselves in after the council adopts a regional plan, anytime we always have this transition period where we're trying to advance our regional plan while recognizing that communities are still amending existing plans that were developed under our previous regional plan. So we're always looking for communities to be making forward progress towards those goals in this interim period as they're amending their plans. And it's part of the reason that Patrick looked more closely. Well, what do the development patterns look like more recently in communities, as you've heard from us when we have been talking about communities who participate in our plant monitoring program, we can include their recent development patterns as credit. We don't have a similar program for our more developed communities, despite us working on one for many years to gather all that data. But using the data that we have, it's a way where we're trying to kind of mimic that same approach, at least in this interim, as we work through some of those work through this transition as we're working toward implementing Imagine 2050. When we look at the whole of implementation, we're really looking toward supporting communities in developing their next round of 2050 local comprehensive plans, where I think a lot of the items in your first question around development patterns and how we might be advancing or relating to other 2050 goals, where in that next local 2050 plan is where they might be addressing that, where their current plan, which I'd have to look close to Maplewood, I do remember reviewing that one, but I don't think they're quite in that same place that we are today with Imagine 2050.
Yeah, Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, that was very helpful. And part of your explanation did relate to my precedent question and the time period for the transition, the interim period, and just making sure there's, an approach that can be applied to other cities in an equitable manner.
Good point. Thanks, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I had some thoughts along the same lines there. I don't recall last time holding people to the next plan's density when you're amending a plan. I mean, that's designed for what happens from when their next plan is approved. We have lots of discussion on the edge communities because they're bringing land potentially into the MUSA, but this is not bringing it into the MUSA. I assume they had bathrooms before and a kitchen in the golf course or something. So I question why we would even need that sort of in-depth look at it. I mean, Maplewood is apparently responding to the market because we still have demands for single-family and townhomes, even in farther in. They're probably not going to be cheap, but there's certainly a demand, and accommodating the demand is kind of what we need to be doing, because if people can't find the kind of house they want, they move somewhere else, and we want people to have choices. So I guess I'm questioning why we need to take such a close look at a redevelopment proposal when they're well within the range for their 2040 plan, and they haven't come in yet for their 2050 plan. It seems premature to be taking that level of scrutiny.
Chair and Councilmember Wolf, let me take a crack at that and then have Lisa kind of follow up on this. The staff report for you says that they are consistent with regional policy. So we are in a time where we've sent out system statements, and the expectation is that cities move towards that direction. Now, we're not gonna, this is not a conformance issue, so it's purely just commentary. I think part of the work that my colleague Mackenzie Young-Walters is doing around MUSA implementations, that's the policy that has been before the CDC. It's been before LUAC a number of times through internal work groups. And as that gets adopted by the council as set policy for MUSA implementation, one of the onsets is like, okay, we have a little bit of a gap here because we have this plat monitoring program which takes on live time what's going on. We don't have anything similar to that for developed communities like Maplewood. So it's an opportunity to kind of a quick like, hey, this is kind of where the direction we're going, and at least give some of the council here tonight a peek, a little bit of what our thinking was, and get, provoke this kind of conversation.
Director Barajas wanted to comment, or do you want to comment first?
Oh, you can go ahead, and then I have
Director
another.
Barajas.
I was just going to add, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to add, just for context, that the approach that is part of the business item in the staff report, we linked to the business item 2025-113 that the council adopted as part of the implementation of Imagine 2050 and the review of local comprehensive plans and plan amendments back in May of last year. That approach is similar to the approach that the council also had adopted in the 2040 cycle after the adoption of Thrive. I think the difference is that after the adoption of Thrive, we were still in a very slow recovery from the housing downturn. And so we had seen very little development and few amendments at that time. And the amendments that we did see were actually more for higher density development than what we're seeing in this cycle. So we're in a little bit of a different economic stage. And so we're seeing developments in a different fashion. That doesn't mean we won't see higher density development along the way as well. But the intent is to ensure that we're moving toward the goals of Imagine 2050 and not undermining our regional system. So the conformance piece is the key element here, which is why staff had done additional analysis on that. More recent development pattern was, are we still with existing more recently approved development patterns, plus this development still kind of still in conformance with our regional systems plans with those and not causing an impact. If we looked at the amendment on its own, plus the existing 2040 plan, it would look like it was out of conformance. So that's why we wanted to bring in that existing pattern, really just to ensure that we're meeting that conformance standard.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you. The report, the last 2 pages have the same map. It still shows everything green on the last page. I kept flipping. You got a black and white, so it's not going to help you any. But until the PowerPoint came up, I kept flipping between these 2 maps going, I don't understand this. These maps look the same. But then once you put the PowerPoint up, I realized that it was just a mistake in the report. So that should be updated before it goes to the full council.
I can easily make that correction for the committee report to the council then.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you for catching that. My eyes see the same color, so thank you for catching that.
Further discussion or questions on this report? Any questions? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve this comprehensive plan amendment. Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, so moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. That was Councilmember Wolf, correct?
No, that was.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why. I have a little audio thing here,
Sound so
but
much alike.
my apologies. Councilmember Morales. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Boylan, for your work on this. Makes sense. We'll move on to our information items. We have two. The first is the 2026 Livable Communities Funding Allocation Recommendation. And Emily Seddon? Seddon, thank you, Emily, is here. Ms. Seddon, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. Thank you for having me. I'm Emily Seddon, the manager for the Livable Communities Program. And today I am bringing a discussion information item before you to get your feedback about the funding recommendation to accompany the Livable Communities Program design that you approved last fall. So just a brief recap for anyone watching that isn't familiar with the program. 2026 will be 30 years since we awarded our first grant. So the Livable Communities Program is an incentive grant program that is really designed to advance the Imagine 2050 goals about our region being equitable and inclusive, healthy and safe, and dynamic and resilient. And the ways that we do this are by helping cities expand the housing choices available to residents in their community, improving safety, and making sure that everyone can meet their needs within their community. So this should sound familiar. This is a lot of what we heard from the engagement that we did over the course of 2025. Going into 2026, I'm really pleased to say we are up to 80 cities and 1 township participating in the Livable Communities Program. So cities must opt in by adopting affordable and life cycle housing goals. I would add as kind of the caveat to the map you see on the screen, if you were on the committee in 2024, you might remember Mary Kay Bailey and Ellen Walters' consultant report to us. One of the things that they talked about in terms as they analyzed our geographic distribution of grant participation was that this program really makes the most sense for communities where development is happening and development that's in alignment with the regional goals. So in many cases, this means that townships often don't opt in. There's just not enough development happening for them to feel that it's worthwhile. So when you see the little splotches of yellow kind of out in those southwestern suburbs or southern suburbs, a lot of times that's the city participating and then the township around it not. And so just to be clear that as we continue to do our outreach, we're really focusing region-wide on making sure that we can expand housing choice, improve safety, and make sure people can meet their needs in their community. So just a reminder about the annual timeline, and part of this was what was approved this past fall. So in the fall, for the first time, I think, we approved a 2-year plan for the program design, and that is really important to our partners for that stability and planning. Right, development projects take a really long time, so if they can know what our goals are going to be for the next 2 years, that's really helpful to them. So last fall we approved that. Now kind of through February I'll be coming to you for the funding recommendation. April 15th will be our first grant deadline of the year, with awards announced in the summer, funding recommendations brought to you in the summer. In the summer is also when the applications are due to the Minnesota Housing Consolidated Request for Proposals, which we are a funding partner in. So our applicants will be applying through that process still. And then in October, we have a second round of Livable Communities applications due, with funding then in the winter. And those winter award recommendations coincide with the Minnesota Housing Consolidated RFP recommendations. Our team is doing outreach and technical assistance all throughout the year. It certainly is heavier when we get around application times, but we are constantly available to our partners. And then this cycle is going to repeat for 2027. There are 3 active funding accounts within the Livable Communities Act. The kind of important thing to know about them is that they fund slightly different things. TBRA funds our environmental site investigation and cleanup. LHIA is really focused on housing and is the only program that requires a dollar-for-dollar match, which makes it a little bit different for participating cities. And then the LCDA account is our most flexible account. It's important to note, I think, that the LCDA account is also the only one where the money changes every year in our base revenue, or can change. The TBRA and LHIA accounts have a fixed amount set in statute, whereas the LCDA account can grow a little bit as our tax levy grows. So you probably we hear constantly that the greatest need for cities is more money into affordable housing. And we're going to have a conversation today about the smartest way to spend the resources we have. And I just want you to know that they're not growing very fast.
Senator, before we leave this slide, can I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
And I'm getting better at understanding this, but for the benefit maybe of some of the newer members as well. So of the 3 Livable Communities Act funding accounts, are these all statutorily defined, or are some of them defined by Met Council policy?
They are all statutorily defined, and then our policy builds upon that and operationalizes that. So, for example, the Livable Communities Demonstration Account is just goal-oriented, anything that's going to promote our goals. And so we have used it to offer the policy development program, which is new as of 2022. So we are able to, within that one particularly, have some flexibility. And then certainly in some of the eligibility and factors we consider when we're doing the awards. That's all council policy set.
Cool, thanks. So the accounts are defined in statute, but we have some flexibility through policy to impact the amounts in each account, correct?
Yeah, the amounts that are going to the different types of uses. Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
Thank you, thanks.
And then I guess the other thing I will add here is that we did this last year and plan to do it again this year. As you may remember, the council received from HUD the Pathways to Removing Obstacles to Housing funding. At this point, that is still an active grant. And so last year, we supplemented the policy development program with additional funds from that resource, and we plan to do the same thing this year. I won't talk much about that because what the council needs to approve is just the Livable Communities funding, but certainly can answer questions about what that looks like as well.
Thank you.
So the base revenue, this is the revenue that comes in from the different tax sources. It totals $21.5 million for the year. It's a slight increase over the base revenue from last year. We have done significant spending of the programmable reserves over the past 5 years, which has decreased the overall reserve balance available for us to work with this year. on one hand, I think this is a really good thing because we shouldn't be sitting on money that is really needed by the community. And on the other hand, my finance colleagues would probably be annoyed if I didn't mention that these reserves are also used to help the council manage cash flow. And then there's the other side of interest earnings, where if we're taking money out of an interest earning account, we're not going to earn quite as much interest on it, so it becomes harder to replenish that source over time. So that's one of the things that I want the council to be aware of as we are deciding how much to spend this year. Not shown here, but just in case you have the question in the back of your mind, we also have what I would call unprogrammable reserves. There is money in the program that is already committed to grants. And so I've just left, for simplicity, left that out, but no, the money we're talking about today is all free for us to commit. And the money that is needed for current grants is reserved.
Mr. Chair, can I ask?
Yeah, please, Councilmember Wolf.
It's not in your thing, but it's in the report about kind of the history of the restricted reserves. And are we just seeing fewer applicants not be able to do their projects? Is that why there's not money showing up?
For the restricted reserves, I think we've had so the TBRA account that funds the environmental projects there's been a few years where that's been under, there's been fewer requests than there has been funds available, so that's helped maintain some restricted balance there. We do still see projects that aren't able to complete or relinquish some of their funds because maybe they didn't need quite as much as we awarded them after all, since we're a reimbursement-based project. What happens and why there's no restricted reserve for the LCDA and LHIA account is that it took me a minute to understand this. So in our council accounting system, over the years, as we've awarded the unrestricted reserve, that money has stayed within that unrestricted reserve account. It hasn't been moved over to the LCDA or LHIA account, even though we've awarded it through those programs. And so then when you look at our accounting books, what it looks like is that we have a deficit in those two accounts. And so when funds are relinquished back to the LCDA or LHIA account, they're kind of paying off that balance of grants that we called LCDA or LHIA, but were actually made from unrestricted reserves. So it's kind of an accounting fluke, which I believe they're thinking that they will make the journal entry at some point, but it requires a budget amendment, and so that's a whole nother process.
So the accounting fluke gives us more keeps that flexibility in the
Yeah.
money because we were originally flexible. Okay, that makes sense then. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks,
that's a good
Councilmember.
question, yeah.
That was a good question. Ms. Sin.
So just before we go into the scenarios, just a preview of the questions that are in your packet as well. But I'm curious about what you like about the three scenarios that I will present to you. These certainly are not the only three scenarios that we could consider in terms of what I bring forward to the committee for a final recommendation. What would you like to see prioritized differently? And what are your thoughts on using that programmable reserve? Looking at the scenarios, I want to call out that in the information item, the large text one, there is typos in the total line of that table 5, that rainbow table. It should match table 3. So the scenario 1 is the base revenue only of 21.5 million. Scenario 2 is the base revenue plus a small percentage of reserves at 22.5. So in scenario 1, I'll talk through the different uses in a little bit more detail than I will in the others. It would be the most dramatic change to our program. It would be about an $8 million decrease in what we make available to the community compared to last year. So we are looking at holding the policy development use pretty steady to what we did last year. And like I said, we plan to supplement that with some of the HUD funding that we have available. Small area planning is a new program that was added in 2026. The maximum that an applicant can ask for in this is $100,000. And so if we expect that we'll get a lot of applications, but if, depending on where we end up, the most we could fund would be 4, or the fewest we could, if everybody's asking for the most money, we would fund 4. The next 2 categories are what we're considering our early stage development projects. And so this combines uses from both what used to be known just as the TBRA, Tax-Based Revitalization Program, and the pre-development program. And so pretty consistent to use, consistent to use last year, allocating $500,000 for the environmental site investigation and $1.4 million for pre-development activities. The $1.4 million is a decrease. Part of that is that we needed to decrease somewhere because we are adding a new program and making other commitments to increase other places where we increase. But also, and probably more importantly, not every city participates in this. Some cities like to see projects further along before they bring them in for Met Council funding. And oftentimes that's just because we hear that anecdotally that's really just because it's simpler for them to administer. So with a construction draw, sometimes you can, it's 1 or 2, it's a really routine process to get that reimbursement. Whereas with pre-development, you're dealing more with consultants and final reports and things like that. And so it's a slightly more administratively heavy. In the construction stage of development projects, we have the environmental cleanup funded or recommended at a consistent level to last year. And then in the homeownership outcome, this is a place where in the housing policy plan, we committed to increasing the amount of funding that the council put towards homeownership. So in 2025, the program had $3 million available. We recommend a small increase to that. And then kind of the biggest bucket of all of the other types of construction that don't have specific call-outs in our policy plan, we would put $8.75 million. That, again, that represents a pretty significant decrease from what was available last year, which was about $15 million. And then finally, while it funds really similar outcomes to the general construction stage projects, the Minnesota Housing Consolidated RFP, last year we put about $2.5 million into that and would recommend keeping that level. With this program, there certainly is a level of meaningfulness of the amount of work it takes to coordinate with Minnesota Housing to really make a difference in a project and help them close the gaps. We wouldn't want to make that too small. So those are some of the considerations in addition to what was in your packet about how we started to think about these scenarios. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario is really only $1 million increase over the base reserves, and that's drawing from that restricted tax-based revitalization account. So keeping those unrestricted reserves stable for a year. And so that increases the environmental cleanup line. In scenario 3 here, that blue title should actually say 40% of reserves, not small percentage. 40 is not small. But this is where we would take funding from the unrestricted reserve to boost the total amount available back up to something that's a little bit more comparable to last year. So this scenario 3 is about a $2 million decrease over what we had last year, made available last year. And so with that, yeah, we can talk about your ideas and questions that you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Hidden, for the report, and thank you for the clarification on the small percentage of reserves. You answered my question there, and I know there's some discrepancy or typos between the
Yes.
presentation and
Apologies.
the report as well, so thanks for clarifying that. And I see Councilmember Wolf has a question, but I just want to ask, so we decided on a 2-year program here, right, which I love predictability and things like that, and so I'm just wondering how proposing different scenarios relates to the idea of a 2-year program.
That is a really great question, and one that we don't have right, aside from the base revenue, don't have a lot of control over. So we know there will be income into the unrestricted reserve over the next year, but we aren't really in the business of predicting that. So we are, so I think we would love to be able to say we will offer similar amounts both years, and the reality is we might not be able to say that, but we would be able to say, right, like the base reserves or the base revenue isn't going anywhere, so we know we will at least have that for the 2 years.
Thank you, that was helpful. Further discussion, Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So with the sales tax money that is going to cities, do we know what everybody's capacity is in terms of distribution, you know? I mean, what are, I don't know that you're gonna know what everybody's doing, but I hope you have a better idea than I do of.
Yeah. Yeah, and I might defer to Director Brajas or Sarah on some of this, but it's still early enough for some cities with the local affordable housing aid, the LAHA is what you may hear our staff call it, funding, that some cities are still figuring out what to do with it. And so actually some of our policy development and program development grants from 2025 are helping the cities do that. Some are putting the money directly into projects, which is a great way to show right, city support for affordable housing development. Some are looking at homeowner rehab funds. So there's really a lot of different work. Some are doing other policy work. So there's really a lot of variety depending on the city context that we're hearing about, but it's definitely of interest both to our housing policy team and coordinating with Minnesota Housing to understand how those funds are being spent and what impact they're going to have on the funding environment.
So
I don't know if there's anything you want to
if I
add.
could follow up, I mean, to me, we should be, kind of working together and seeing where we can have the most impact collectively in how the money goes, depending on where the need is with other programs, I guess. But I don't know enough of the totality to be able to give a smart answer to.
Yeah.
Well, since these are new revenues, I don't know that any of us have that knowledge. Did you want to say something, Director Brajas?
Yeah, I would just add that, when we have first report from Minnesota Housing. We'll be happy to share that with you all too, around how funds are cities are required to report how they're using those funds more specifically. So we'd be happy to share that with you. We know for some cities, the amount of money that they're receiving is pretty small. And for others, it will be a little bit larger. And then not all cities within the region will have received money either. It was just designated for cities with population, I believe, of 10,000 or higher. And as you all know, we do have a number of cities much smaller than that. So I think impact will be really variable for a variety of different reasons, but definitely happy to share additional information as we receive it too.
Thank you.
I guess to me, Mr. Chair, the
Yeah.
thought would be to maximize next year when we have a better idea of where everything is panning out.
Agree. Agree. Or one might suggest that we would have authority over allocating revenues that we're levying for, but nobody asked me about that. So I have in queue Council Members Lindstrom, Chambliss, and Carter. Councilmember Lindstrom.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say that makes a good case for supplementing our policy funds with pro funds, because cities are going to be, hopefully be applying for those and creating housing action plans with what are they going to do with their LAHA
Yeah.
money, and reducing barriers and all the other things that Richfield and New Brighton are doing, and the other grant recipients so far.
Yep, exactly.
Did you have a comment, Ms. Hedman? Was that?
I think, yeah, you're exactly right. I think part of what is really helpful about supplementing the Livable Communities program with the HUD funding is that it does allow us a little bit of expansion into what we fund. And so the Livable Communities program funds policy development, and at the supplementation of the HUD funding, we've been able to say we'll also fund your program development. And so some of the grants like Richfield that you saw before you last fall are doing exactly that program development work.
Cool, thanks. Councilmember Chambliss and Councilmember Carter. Councilmember Chambliss.
Well, the different scenarios can get pretty complex in terms of evaluating them. At a high level, I like opportunities for flexibility. Supplemental funding allows that aspect. I also like the aspect of having community-centered development. Community-centered spaces was mentioned as one of the options for development projects. And I think it's an area where we're seeing a lot of gaps and under-resourced opportunities exercised there. So I think that is important. Meeting the community needs, I've heard Councilmember Wolf, I mean, that's what we're talking about is how can we look at this from a community needs focus so that they have the opportunity and the flexibility to meet those needs for their specific communities. I think that's really important. And then my other question is related to so many questions here. Well, it's not necessarily a question, but more emphasis on the support for emerging developers. Are cities aware of some of the things that the council has prioritized and is trying to emphasize that can help communities thrive per our 2050 plan? And what does that look like in terms of promoting our priorities?
Yeah, our whole team is really grateful that the committee and the council put right up front in the program design that was approved in the fall that additional 2 points for emerging developers of color that are working on development projects. And so as we've been doing information sessions over the past few months, we have been highlighting, we would always go through the scoring criteria, but also highlighting how the council is advancing its equity goals through specific scoring criteria. That one included also the consideration for if the project is going to serve a Native American population, that it's delivered by a Native American developer. And so those have been well received. The whole program design overall has been very well received, especially among smaller developers, right? Cities that were very, very comfortable in our old ways always have a little bit of challenge with change, but overall have been working really closely with our team.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. And I see that scenario number 3 has a little bit more allocated for early stage development and pre-development. So I kind of like that aspect, and I also like the aspect that there's more for the multifamily rental housing in that scenario as well. Those really kind of stood out for me.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Carter, then Councilmember Lee.
Thank you. Yeah, I just been looking at the scenarios, appreciate your pulling the numbers up and down as needed to show us the options. And I am one who believes that while our communities do have some funds, at least many of them do, to apply to ensuring that they're able to meet, for example, their affordable housing needs, we can do more together. And so really don't favor seeing those amounts come down in areas where I know, or at least I hope, they will be taking advantage of the funding that they have to put into new projects and can use our partnership to enable those funds to go farther, at least at the beginning of these projects. So I do favor seeing those numbers remain higher, while I also hear other committee members who are sharing, and fairly so, that cities may be figuring out, communities may be figuring out a lot of what they will need to do and planning to get things on the ground in next year, perhaps over this year. So we may see a little bit of a lull in what they're prepared to do. I agree that that second year then may be more of an opportunity for all of us. So if the balance would be in the middle there, so that we are able to do what we can in this year in partnership, and then save, in particular, those dollars in reserve to help out in that next year. I am encouraged by the bounce, that there is not a discounting of the amount in affordable home ownership. Know that we are putting more, in all cases, into that area, because I think that is a great need that we have in the area. We have a need across the board for all kinds of housing, and certainly in this type where we're able to also help to build wealth. I believe that we need to continue to have that concentration. And then I am really in favor of seeing those areas where our communities don't have to have a match, able to help them in those early stages. So agree that in the policy development and policy development and early stage development in particular, I want to know more about the small area planning as the new area that we're moving into. I can understand how it helps us across the region in developing areas that are close to transit, making certain that we have transit-friendly communities growing. So I like seeing it, but I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit more about the origin of that new area such that we're seeing it here today.
Sure. So this has been feedback that our staff, prior to my arrival at the council, had been receiving from cities that would be really helpful in helping them meet their affordable housing goals. It was a struggle to talk about one building. They wanted to talk about an entire area and what that looked like. One of our partners, and I have this written on the whiteboard in my cubicle, says like one project doesn't make a vibe. And that just really rings true. And so then as we started to get closer to the comprehensive planning cycle, we also started hearing from cities that in order to really get the best comprehensive plan, the one that was most bold and aligned with the Imagine 2050 vision, it would be really helpful in their communities if they could use a small area plan as a test case. And so the council has offered small area planning loans and grants along transit in the past. So there was precedent for this. And so as we started to think about our program and how it works, both in setting the conditions for development and funding development itself, the small area planning really seemed like a logical connection to the policy development piece. And so those two outcomes combined are really how we support setting conditions for the kind of development that the council wants to see across the region. And then we have that separate part of funding the projects themselves.
Well, I really appreciate hearing
Yeah.
more about that, and I'm glad to hear the small area planning feedback from our communities. It does make a lot of sense, and it also engages more community in developing those areas. So I'm really bouncing back and forth in that I want to see us partner aggressively in that first year. But I understand we may have more opportunity in the second, and indeed can beef up our funds more in the second year if we come in more in that middle ground in the first year. And perhaps even beyond what we're seeing, I'll just add that. I know that our reserves are important. It's important to be able to have those there. We anticipate additional reserves coming. So I don't know if I would want to limit us to scenario 3, even in that second year. But would want to know if we would have opportunity, although we're looking across that 2-year period of time, to go back, reassess, and actually make changes for the second year, if need be.
Makes sense. Thank you, Councilmember IBNQ. Councilmembers Lee, Morales, and Lindstrom. Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Echoing Councilmember Chambliss, I like scenario 3 for the reasons she stated, but also it retains the higher environmental cleanup from amount from scenario 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say I like scenario 3 the most, and one of the main reasons I do is if you look at any of the cranes that went up last year for affordable housing, 90+% of those cranes that went up had money attached either through the state, through the cities, through the counties, through us, and that was literally the only reason those cranes went up last year. There's a lot of projects that are in the construction stage waiting for money to become available for them to start breaking ground and start working, right? If one of our main goals is to create more affordable housing, I genuinely think scenario 3 will be the best. We need to have that money available for a lot of these projects that are waiting for the funds to get going. We've all seen how things have been progressing either here in the state. This year, we might not get the same amount of money through the state for a lot of the different programs for affordable housing. So we need to put our, lack of better words, money where our mouth is and put that money back out there for the community. So I stand strongly for scenario 3.
Thank you.
Thank you for that perspective, Councilmember Morales. Excellent. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom.
I heard a politician recently say that everything has been said, but it hasn't been said by me yet.
Is that you, Councilmember Lindstrom, or?
So, that being said, I will say that in my career, it has served me pretty well to listen to the financial people when they talk about interest, earnings, and cash flow and things of that nature. And so take that advice seriously, of course. But if the term crisis is in the problem that you're trying to address, affordable housing crisis, then it's better to get the money into the streets, like Councilmember Morales was just saying. So I tend to lean in that direction along with my colleagues.
Great. Thank you. And I'll just put my 2 cents in. I agree with Councilmember Lindstrom, Councilmember Morales, and Councilmember Carter to a point that the higher numbers seem more meeting the moment, I guess. And just to repeat Councilmember Carter's point, I like scenario 3's increase in the home ownership piece and in the wealth building. And maybe it would be a little helpful to know more what the finance folks are thinking. But I suspect you wouldn't bring us anything, Ms. Seddon, that threw everything out of whack, right? And, right, and so I'm not too concerned there, but and to Councilmember Wolf's earlier points, and this is a learning year of what these new housing tax revenues will do to us, and I think we'll learn a lot this first year, and to Councilmember Carter's point, that we'll be able to adjust for 2027. So I guess if you're keeping score, that's a statement in favor of scenario 3. Cool. Any further comments? I really appreciate how you brought this to us. It was very well organized, and I think the discussion questions were spot on. Are you getting what you need from this committee, Ms. Seddon?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no,
Appreciate
thank you.
all the
Anything else, committee members? Cool, thank you.
Thank you.
When are you coming back with this?
Your next meeting, the
Okay,
2nd?
cool.
Is that February 2nd?
Thank you. Next, we will talk about system statements, and that'll be presented by Director Barajas. Do you want to present? Okay, cool. All right.
Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Barajas, Executive Director of the Community Development Division. I just have a short update for you today on where we are at with system statements and system statement hearings. My apologies to Councilmember Morales, who has to hear this a second time, but you can put it on screensaver mode. I won't be offended. It's okay. But just wanted to be sure, I had shared this with the Land Use Advisory Committee last week, and want to be sure that Community Development Committee members are also aware of where we are at and then what our next steps look like with the dispute process that is prescribed under the law that cities are allowed to enter into and that we must go through. So I'll walk through that process a little bit and what that means, as well as the different disputes that we have in front of us and what our next steps are. So we issued system statements in mid-September of 2025. That's 181 cities and townships, individualized statements, as well as individualized statements for each county in the region that shows their individual forecasts, how each of our regional systems and the capital plans impact that particular community, so specific maps to that community for everything we do at the council and then some. That generated a lot of conversation. Our sector reps were on point and responding to our local government staff and representatives and answering questions, providing clarity, responding to communities, especially we always see kind of every 10 years, there's always a little bit of change in staffing as well. So for some communities, our staff might be the first time through this process, so just answering general questions as well as addressing specific issues. We did have 29 communities raise specific issues. Those issues range everywhere from just minor corrections, like, oh, didn't quite get the right map there, or we need to show a slightly updated version of a MUSA consistent with amendments that the council has already authorized. Just some kind of easy to fix types of content issues, which are bound to happen as humans creating 188 documents in a short time period. We had, like I said, a lot of requests for just clarifications on next steps and what things mean. And then our primary issue was really around forecasts. It's actually pretty typical. The last 2 cycles, we had similar questions around forecasts and what cities were looking for. We have a group of forecast changes that between council staff and city staff, we have agreement amongst those proposed changes. And, oh, I didn't change that August again, sorry. Meant to change it. We're not bringing it in August. We're bringing it next month in February to you all. So we'll be here in Community Development Committee in our second meeting, February 17th. I don't know why it says August. And then following council there, about a dozen changes or so. And those changes are supported by additional information that cities had provided about developments in the pipeline, proposed developments in the pipeline, on the ground development that's been happening, as well as just some updated information that we had as well. So we were able to come to some minor adjustments to support those forecast changes. Before I walk into a couple, I just want to kind of walk through the dispute process just a little bit. So we usually, when communities have a disagreement with their system statement, their first point of contact, like I mentioned, is with their sector rep to discuss the contents, to discuss any issues they might have, and we usually find resolution. But if we don't find resolution, under law, local government does have the ability to request a hearing, and they must do so within 60 days after receiving the system statement. So that deadline for receipt was plus or minus right before Thanksgiving. Communities receive their system statements on slightly different dates. We use a certified mail so we can actually track that and get the right date and set their deadline appropriately. So we go through that process, and then if we do receive a request for a hearing, then under the law, the hearing must be held within 60 days after receiving that request. Because of how the law was written and how things happen in actuality with holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, all of those things. I don't think we have ever held a hearing within 60 days after we received the request, but rather instead we are able to mutually agree upon a timeline that actually works for both the city and for the council. Everybody says, well, none of us are around, so can we schedule this for February, March, April, May? So that's when hearings typically are held. After a hearing is held and there's a recommendation from the hearing body, that report is sent to the council within 30 days for the council to take action on that report.
I'm sorry, were you finished with the slide? Or before you went on, I just wanted to clarify, this hearing process, utilization of this hearing process is pretty rare, right? That we go all the way through all steps?
Yes, and I will get into that a little bit. It does happen, but given the number of communities that we have and the number of times that the council has issued system statements, you would say a relatively small percentage of system statements result in a hearing.
Thank you.
And then finally in this process, the council then, under the law, makes the final determination within 30 days of receiving that report of recommendation. So in this cycle, we did receive 5 requests for hearings. That's pretty typical. We received 5 requests in the last cycle, and in the 2030 cycle, I think we also received 5 requests. A lot of comments, a lot of conversations, but just 5 formal requests for hearings. I will just talk about Farmington first. Farmington, from top to bottom, we actually have come to an agreement around, they just required a forecast, an upward adjustment to their forecast. And like many communities, many communities will just reserve their right to request a hearing as a part of requesting a change to their system statement. And in the case of Farmington, we were able to come to that resolution rather quickly, and we are just actually sending out that stipulated agreement just today, actually, for signature. And then the changes to those forecasts will be part of that larger forecast action that we'll bring to you all in February, not August. So no hearing will be held for the Farmington one. We were glad to come to resolution there. Then among the 4 other hearings, you can see on here that most communities were requesting upward changes to their forecast. You will also see that except North Oaks, who was actually requesting a downward change to their forecast, and in addition, expansion of the metropolitan urban service area to accommodate failing septics within their community and essentially providing sewer service to the entire community. This is an issue that we have advised the city that we cannot resolve through negotiation. That's a planning issue, a policy issue that the council needs to do planning for. And so we will continue to discuss with them what that process looks like. But at this point, for you'll see the bottom 3, Hugo, North Oaks, and Oakdale, have all requested hearings with the Court of Administrative Hearings, whereas the City of Forest Lake has requested their hearing to be held at the Land Use Advisory Committee. Both of those are allowable options under the law, and it's up to the city to select which option they would like to have as a part of their formal hearing request. So we do have tentative schedules for all 4 of those entities and for all of those cities. And at the same time, we continue to talk with them about potentially finding resolution, talking about our processes for how the council makes decisions, like for requests to expand sewer service, for example, as well as where we have flexibility in forecast changes and where we don't, where it's outside of maybe what we see in the data today. So we want to be sure that cities are aware of our processes too. And one item that we would like to share, especially for maybe where we see staff who haven't been through this process before, is just a reminder that while we start with these forecasts in our system statements, the council always considers changes to forecasts throughout the planning cycle, whether they're in year 2 of developing their local comprehensive plan, not quite ready for submittal. If conditions on the ground change where market's suddenly roaring and they've got all sorts of cranes in the air, as you were saying, Councilmember Morales, where we weren't seeing that today, then we are always looking at things that are happening on the ground to inform how we adjust our forecast, and vice versa. If there are new restrictions or something else that's happening, new constraints on the ground, changes in regulation that limit their ability to grow, we're always taking that into consideration. And we actually have a formalized process for requesting how to request a forecast change and the types of information and evidence that we like to see in order to inform that process. And then we bring all those changes to you all at this committee and then the council for formal action. So we'll talk through with our counterparts in each of these cities as we work toward preparing for those hearings. The Court of Administrative Hearings, all of those are scheduled in March, April, May timeframes in collaboration with each of those cities. And the LUAC hearing is scheduled for a March timeline. So April, thank you. Didn't mean to scare you there. April timeline, and especially so we can provide sufficient training to committee members on how to conduct the hearing, what role they play, et cetera. This is just a more detailed timeline of what the different roles are and actions are as it relates to holding a hearing at LUAC. But largely what we're doing here is mimicking the process that you would see at a Court of Administrative Hearings, with how we ensure that materials are prepared sufficiently in advance to give members time to read all of the materials, view the exhibits, as well as ensure that we are operating on a fair and consistent approach to that as we're holding the hearings here, that any city that is holding a hearing or having their hearing at LUAC is receiving the same sort of fair treatment that they would receive at the Court of Administrative Hearings as well. So making that process very clear. And this is very much detailed in statute as well. It's a lot of legalese though, so we try to visualize it to make it a little bit easier to understand. It also helps staff to remember what we need to do and when, and how to make sure that we're getting our parts done in sufficient time. As I had mentioned, we'll be preparing LUAC for training. We'll also be providing context to the council, the Metropolitan Council, as we approach the time periods in which we will be receiving recommendations, whether it's from the Court of Administrative Hearings or from the Land Use Advisory Committee, because of that timeline for the council to receive that recommendation from either of those bodies, and then the timeline within which the council must act on that recommendation. As a part of our training for LUAC, we'll be talking about roles in the hearing process, what the LUAC's role is, what council staff's role is, how different legal staff will be supporting and representing the council, representing and supporting the LUAC, and then obviously cities have their own legal counsel, so there will be different parties that are supporting that. We try to keep some segregation of duties at the council among staff as well in order to ensure we're giving that fair hearing when it comes to hearings at LUAC. And then we will walk through any other questions that LUAC has as well. When we are getting ready to prepare for recommendations coming to the full council, we will provide a similar training around what that context is and how they're hearing that and why different legal counsel will be involved or not involved in presenting that information to the council. Councilmember Wolf might remember when we brought the Oak Grove recommendation and how our legal counsel were segregated in that fashion as well, and helping to present that to the full council, and then having the council make that final determination. So that's all I have for you today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Barajas. I do have a quick question. I see Councilmember Wolf is requesting the floor too. And maybe I'm asking and answering my own question here, but because this is a hearing and based on an appeal, is this what we would consider a quasi-judicial action? And I look forward to the training, but I know from my years on the Minneapolis City Council, there's certain behaviors when you're acting as in a quasi-judicial manner rather than a policy manner.
Mr. Chair, that's a really great question. Yes, it would be quasi-judicial.
Okay.
One of the things that we walk through with the LUAC is what is considered allowable to consider under the, within a hearing, and it's really about the contents of the system statement itself. It's not a re-review of council policy. It's not anything around process pieces per se, unless it impacts what's in the system statement itself, but really just about those contents and whether the approach to those contents was fair, essentially.
Right, thanks. And so ultimately, the council makes the final decision, right, a final determination, so we'll be bound by certain behaviors.
That's correct.
Thanks. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Forest Lake is requesting a change from suburban edge to what?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Wolf, that is what we have asked them to provide us. In all hearings, cities are allowed to dispute any portion, but they also must propose what the change should be. We can't just come up with something, and that has been part of the request, that we will see what they submit as a change there, but they have been advised that they can't just say not that. They have to tell us what instead.
Thank you.
Thanks. Very helpful. Further discussion, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think this is related to the chair's question. Are the cities mostly disputing our methods or our data sets? And is that part of the disagreement, or are there other things?
Dr. Ross.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lee, that's a really good question. There isn't so much a dispute with our methods. There may be for some cities and unfamiliarity with our methods. So some of what we are talking about with them is how we've come up with these forecasts, where they've come from, what they're based on, and how we generate them. There's certainly is some unfamiliarity as I've been talking with them and more with some of them, not with everybody. And in other cases, some cities just want higher numbers because they're looking, they're thinking about the amount of growth maybe they had previously been planning for when we were, 10 years ago, when we were in a different kind of planning regime, and we're expecting higher rates of growth than what we are expecting looking now out to 2050. We had a similar sort of group of cities in the last cycle as well who were, aspirationally looking for higher numbers, but even from going from our 2030 forecast to our 2040 forecast, we had a similar kind of decline in the rate of growth. And that means a little less growth to spread around over a longer period of time. So there's always just a little bit of like, well, don't take it from me, take it from them kind of approach or desire. And then that being said, there are other communities where they, growth isn't evenly distributed around our region as much as it would probably make things easier. It just isn't. And some cities might be seeing decreases in their rate of growth, while other cities are continuing to see kind of similar patterns of growth as they've been experiencing. And so we're always looking a little more closely at what's actually happening on the ground to calibrate that better. And so sometimes we're hearing from cities, we're like, oh, we just approved like these 7 big things in the pipeline. They're just not in our data set yet. So that helps to inform some of that. So that's where we hear some of our discussion, not with the hearings ones, but with the communities where we have come to agreements is where we've seen some changes on the ground. They've got, approved plans, approved projects that just weren't showing up in our data sets yet.
Thank you. Further questions or comments, discussion? Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to comment that forecasts are made even more complex because you're dealing with who's living in the units that you already have, and that changes over time too as people become empty nesters or whatever.
Yep. Mr. Chair, Councilmember, that is a regular part of the conversations we have. They're like, but we have all these people. And we're like, well, we don't actually see that.
Well, thanks. Further discussion? Further discussion. Hearing none, thanks, Director Barajas. This is a very great update. Looking forward to seeing how this process plays out.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else for the committee, Michelle? No, Director Barajas? Okay, seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.